Hello, I'm Brian Fox. Welcome to my channel, I Hate Rock Music. First off, I want to thank all the people that have been enjoying my videos and leaving great comments. It really means a lot. I thought this channel was going to be a complete bust, and now it's starting to get people who respond to it. And a lot of people complain I don't have any music on them, and of course I don't have any flashy graphics like a lot of people that do videos like this, but I post all the links below, so if there's any band that you find intriguing that maybe you haven't heard before, or bands that you enjoy, check out the links below, because I spent some time gathering all the known material and live shows and rarities and things like that. So the music's here. You just got to work a little harder for it. But anyway, today I want to talk about the band Bubble Puppy, the legendary Texas semi-psychedelic hard rock band from 1969. And first off, I'll start with my personal story. I used to hear this song, Hot Smoke and Sassafras, on the radio all the time. And of course, like with so many others, it completely blew me away. And it was even on a lot of jukeboxes. So I could actually go into diners and stuff and put on Bubble Puppy. And it actually made number 14 nationally in the Billboard charts, which is amazing, especially for a little boutique label, independent label down in Texas, International Artist Records. And so I actually, by 1970, let's see, 1970, I was 13 years old. And I went to the record store and I special ordered 3 albums. One of them was Bubble Puppy, A Gathering of Promises. And oddly enough, the other 2 were the first Budgie album and the Stooges Funhouse, because most record stores weren't really carrying those records. And so I did get the Stooges record and I did get the Budgie record, but I already got a notice that the Bubble Puppy was out of print. So 1 year after it came out, the Bubble Puppy album was already out of print. But of course I got it later, and I'm going to talk about it today. So the band was Rod Price on guitar, Todd Potter on guitar, Roy Cox on bass, and David Four on drums. And it turns out that there was a couple of mid-60s groups, one called the Four Winds and the other one's called the Titans, and a couple members from each of those bands joined together to become Bubble Puppy. And at first they were called the Willowdale Handcar in 1967, and that sounds like a name of a 1967 band, but the Four Winds and the Titans actually released 3 singles between 1965 and 1966, and they're pretty much what you'd expect, snotty garage band stuff, which is wonderful. But of course, Bubble Puppy became more psychedelic by 1967, and the story goes that they saw Jimi Hendrix at Winterland in 1968 and took acid, and then they changed their name to Bubble Puppy, and it comes from a reference from Aldous Huxley's book Brave New World. There was a term called centrifugal bundle puppy, and of course they are on acid, so it became Bubble Puppy. And in 1968 they moved from Austin to Houston and signed to International Artist Records. And I'm sure they were pretty impressive. And so the first song they wrote actually was Hot Smoke and Sassafras, and I'll talk about that a little bit more later, but of course it's an incredible single, a great representation of the sound in 1968 and 1969, and deserved to be a big hit. I loved it then and I love it now. And so they recorded that in early 1969, and then they recorded their album, which failed more or less. It only reached number 176 in the Billboard charts. And so the album came out, and they, boy, I don't know how to put this. It's a really cool record. It seems a little outdated for 1969. Of course, Led Zeppelin 1 and 2 are already out by then. And listening to the Bubble Puppy album, it really sounds like from another time. So it definitely sounds like something that would have been done in 1968, 1969. So in that sense, it's dated. And the other thing about it is that it's basically the band going in. And apparently they had a lot of studio time, but they recorded the band straight to the record. There isn't any overdubs per se. But that said, it's got some really cool material. There are obviously a bunch of people who probably had some folk roots and then played garage rock and then morphed into a semi-psychedelic hard rock band. And the material is pretty mixed, but there's a lot of great moments with the twin guitar work that really redeemed the record. And the material's pretty good. And they explore a lot of territories. And overall, by the time you're finished listening to it, it has a lot of redeeming qualities. And after a while, it really gets under your skin. But what I was going to say is that it's really striking to me that the fact that their first song they wrote together, Hot Smokin' Sassafras, is just this bitchin' hard rock number with great guitar parts and just really memorable, that they didn't realize that that should be their bread and butter. So by the time the album came out, Hot Smokin' Sassafras is definitely the standout track. And it's really a shame they didn't comprehend what they had there and had a lot more material on the album that was like that. Maybe a lot more shorter tunes with a lot more hard rock and a lot more direct focus in that direction. So they kind of didn't see the writing on the wall, and they should have, because of course the single did really well nationally, and then the album bombed. And the fact that Hot Smokin' Sassafras became such a big hit should have told them the direction they should go in. And in fact, there's a great early track by Bubble Puppy that's now available. It's from a Texas Psych sampler, and it's a song called Secrets of the Golden Shrine, and I'll post that below. And it shows that transition point they made from being kind of a snotty garage band and turning into a psychedelic band. It's a real gem. I think they should have kind of stayed in that direction. But I don't want to understate the value of the album. It really is pretty memorable. Once you play it a few times, it gets under your skin. There's some great arrangements, very imaginative band. There's some great harmony vocals. They seem to have some basis in folk because of the multi-part harmonies. But both guitar players are really stellar, and so the twin guitar work on that Gathering of Promises album is really strong and worth it. And so they carved their own sound. But then they started touring, and they played a lot with Steppenwolf, and they created a bond with Steppenwolf. And so that's when they kind of made a transition. But I'll get to that in a minute. So after the album came out, they actually released 3 or 4 singles. And If I Had a Reason, Days of Our Time, Think About Thinking, and What Do You See? And they were coupled with edits from the album on some of the singles, but it really shows another side of the band that they were really developing, and there was a slight twinge of country in the music as well, and it really, once again, exemplified their great guitar work and their harmonies, and a couple of those songs are real gems and would have been really nice on the album. Fortunately, now there's a CD collection that has the album and all their non-LP material and all the single mixes of everything, because the mono mix of Hot Smokin' Sassafras, of course, is smoking. And but anyway, so they tried, and Thinking About Thinking, they kind of woke up too late, because Thinking About Thinking is just kind of a reworking of the whole idea of Hot Smokin' Sassafras, and it's a great single, and it has that sound, and I think they should have really explored that more. They probably would have been much more successful. And so anyway, now we get to the point where they play with Steppenwolf, and then they were convinced to move to Los Angeles in 1970, and they signed to ABC Records in 1971. And once again, that was because of their connection with Steppenwolf. Steppenwolf really thought they were a cool band, and so they basically got signed to Steppenwolf on Dunhill, and Dunhill's a subsidiary of ABC Records. So the new Bubble Puppy record got signed to ABC Records and was released in 1971. And I also think it's interesting, of course, that second Bubble Puppy album, they changed their name to Damien because Bubble Puppy just sounded too dated. And I find that really interesting too because, of course, Steppenwolf is named after a book by Hermann Hesse. And now Bubble Puppy changed their name to Damien, which is also the name of a book by Hermann Hesse. So I found that pretty fascinating because I wondered why they chose that name. And so the Damien album, I'm including it here because it is essentially a second Bubble Puppy album. And it kind of suffers from the same problems that Gathering of Promises did. Gathering of Promises came out in 1969 and it sounded like 1968. And the Damien album came out in 1971 and sounds more like 1969 or 1970. And it's far better recorded, and there's a lot more overdubs. And once again, there's some amazing moments of twin guitar work by Todd Potter and Rod Price. I'll keep those names in mind. And those are the highlights of the records. And there's some interesting, ambitious arrangements with some things. And once again, it's a conglomeration of more countrified rock mixed with some of the hard rock, a lot of harmonies. But to be frank, the songwriting is just not that strong, and it's really unfortunate. The sound is there, the guitar players are awesome, the multi-part harmonies are really cool, but overall the material is just not that strong, and that's something that marred their first album, Gathering of Promises, somewhat. The songs are pretty good, but not quite great. And but I'm still doing a video because I've really grown to love the Gathering of Promises album. It reeks of pot smoke. It's of its era, and the moments on it that are so good that it's well worth it. And so I recommend Bubble Puppy, but with hesitations. If you think of it as more of a quasi-psychedelic record from 1968, then it's a total winner. But it's hard to even call them psychedelic because they're on the same label as some profoundly psychedelic bands like Red Crayola and Lost and Found and the 13th Floor Elevators, of course. So it sounds like a more straightforward record than a lot of the things on International Artists for sure. So as just a straight rock album with some great hard rock elements, it's really good. So the band continued to get together off and on over the years. They had reunions as late as 2013 and 2014, and there's a couple of records from that period. And it's really cool that they got back together, and because they've become legendary. So they're like so many bands, they get out there and they do it again. And it's not really that they're lacking what they used to have. It just becomes a nostalgia act. But anyway, Bubble Puppy are worth checking out. Some people are really going to dig it. Other people maybe not so much. But certainly a legendary band. And if the only record they ever made was Hot Smokin' Sassafras, they would definitely be worth remembering. Thanks for watching. I Hate Rock Music. I'm Brian Fox.